And we are live.
And welcome back to CoinFest Afternoon of the Blockchain Gaming Expo Part 2, because there was a bit of a cutout there. Since this is the start of a new video, I want to get one last quick round of thanks for our sponsors, specifically first up, the global sponsors for CoinFest, Einstein Exchange and Hoard Exchange, and then all of the local Vancouver sponsors, including Enjin Coin, GeoCoin, CoinDroids, Tapcoin, and Symmetria. National, yeah, how do I forget those guys? They brought an ATM and everything. And Carnival Games. So next we're going to hear from C-Bob Robinson, Chris Bob Robinson. Yeah, C-Bob Robinson, great nickname. I love it, man. He's going to talk to us about Hoard Exchange. I don't know which way he's going with this presentation, so I'll let him pass it over this way.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk about Hoard Exchange a little bit. My name is Chris Robison. I do community management for Hoard. Got a bit of background more in the blockchain side of things. My team, though, is like much more from the game development side. So a little bit about the team. We're based.
Oh shit! That was weird.
What? Spoilers. Yeah. Most of the team is based out in Warsaw. We're actually incorporated in Denmark. But if you want to click to the next slide, you can see some of the titles that our team has worked on just over their career over the last like 10 to 15 years. Most of them are like AAA titles, so they really do come to the blockchain space, like trying to use blockchain to make gaming fun in like really novel ways. Of course, like we're talking the same thing as most people, like tokenization, but also like how can we extend blockchain and gaming even beyond that. So next slide. So just as an overview of like really what we're working on, we have a number of different like research endeavors, but the two main products that we're pushing forward is one, it's a free and open source software development kit. And this is for Unity. It's going to come out in the next like few weeks or so. We have one for Unreal. We're going to do it for JavaScript gaming engines, Godot or Godot, depending on how you pronounce it. And we're just going to keep like rolling those out. So those are totally free, totally open source. Like we don't take any cut for that. This is really a community infrastructure tool. And what these software development kits allow is for any game developer to integrate Ethereum or Plasma into their games. So that's really what we're focused on. In terms of like understanding what the business model is for Hoard, we have a decentralized exchange. So I think it's always good, like when people say it's free and open source, it's like, well, then what's the business model? Because like there always has to be that other side of it. And that's really what we're focused on. Like up front is creating a decentralized exchange. So all of the items that are minted in the software development kit are instantly available on the exchange. So for us, that's a way to bootstrap our exchange and also make sure that games begin to have an incentive to sort of be interoperable with each other, to plug into each other's systems. So from that position, we now have an economic incentive to take all these games that are being developed and sort of unite them in some kind of way, and like the way that blockchain gaming is promising. So the next slide. So we developed a game in-house. This is called Plasma Dog. We deployed it at DevCon just in the end of October, beginning of November. QuantStamp did some auditing for that, local heroes here. And we partnered with Omisedo on it. So this is Omisedo's version of Plasma. It is an MVP chain. We recently redeployed it at Ethereum Denver on more viable Plasma, and that's on Rinkeby on the testnet for Ethereum. And that's a pretty big deal. It was the first Plasma network or application that was deployed to any public Ethereum chain. So in that sense, we're like making great strides and like contributing to the overall ecosystem for Plasma research and testing, which is a huge thing. Of course, I think a lot of people here would agree that like games in a big way is a testing ground or a sandbox for larger blockchain development in the ecosystem. So we're really proud to be able to contribute to that. In terms of what actually happens on chain in this game, all of the assets, all the little tokens that Plasma Dog is collecting are deposited directly into the player's wallet. So this proves a couple things. It proves one, that streaming payments are possible. This saves like a ton of money given the fact that it's on Plasma. And then also the characters are also on chain. So we deployed a token for Ethereum Denver, so all the attendees could play as the mascot for Ethereum Denver, which is the Buffalicorn. We have it set up in the back if you want to check that out later. Something that we just announced at GDC a couple weeks ago, if you go to the next one, please, is an integration with a game called My Memory of Us. So My Memory of Us is an existing title. It came out in October. It's currently on Steam. It's on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch. I've got it set up on the Nintendo Switch in the back. We'll be integrating with this on Steam probably about the next month or so. That'll be released. And when that's released is also when we're developing the first SDK. It's one of a number of projects that we partnered with starting in about November or so. Game studios that we've been working with to pretty much roll out our SDK and do some testing as well. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So really, like, moving forward, that's like just an overview about Hoard. The purpose of this presentation is to explore different ways about how blockchain can augment gameplay. We'll talk about like some very obvious, straightforward things we've been talking about already today, and then dive into some different ideas as well. Quick one more time. The premise is that the Hoard SDK can power all of this, and that's free and open source. It's a tool. So hopefully more community members will contribute to it, and that's the goal. The agenda is to sort of talk about 5 different areas of how blockchain can augment gameplay. Of course, like trading items, making sure that they're valuable. Also making sure that the properties of the items are unique and have some sort of history to them, which is also a form of storytelling, which is what gaming is largely about. It's creating a mythology and engaging in that. We're also going to talk about gameplay and how different game studios can interact with each other for new business models. We'll talk about what this means for developers, and then also just sort of a handful of other ideas that might inspire some thoughts in your guys' mind. So, jumping first into trading items. Of course, like, monetizing qualities of items is very important, so every item can be traded when it's tokenized. But even more than that, like, items can grow in special ways, right? So it's not just like every sword is going to be the same sword. It might have a whole history of gameplay. It might be used in a tournament. It also might have some sort of periphery spell cast upon it or something like that. And so just being able to monetize all that's very important. Also being able to like customize items for players is a very interesting concept that players will specialize in their gameplay. And so making sure that items can have like a whole range of attributes and that there are trade-offs for it also makes for a much richer ecosystem. Of course, this is all secured on-chain with smart contracts, which I'm sure everyone here is familiar with, and that's very exciting. The marketplace, like what Hoard is building in terms of decentralized exchange, is going to make all of these sorts of trades possible. So, like in the very traditional sense, we're talking about like normal buy and sell orders, but as we move forward, we'll talk about other types of exchanges that are also powered by the Hoard exchange. So, when you tokenize any items in a game, of course, there is an opportunity for the studios to take a cut or a percentage, or for any game creators, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But like, our team really does come from the gaming side of things, and they understand there has to be an incentive for the studios to integrate this in the first place. Like, to say that like game studios or like the banks, and we need to take them down, is I don't know that that's actually going to play out in the long term. But there is something to be said about like true ownership is something that we've totally been lacking for a very long time. So like, I think it's fair to sort of like stand up to that, but then also recognize that like there needs to be some sort of mechanism for people to build these virtual worlds that we're all going to be existing in or playing in. So creating royalties for creators is going to be exceptionally important. This is, of course, like the concept of monetizing secondary markets, which as of right now are impossible to capture. Another type of commerce that players can engage in is, besides just like buying and selling orders or buying and selling items to each other, they can also go ahead and create passive income with their items, right? So if a player, like if any of us here are attending CoinFest today, none of us are playing our games. So while we're here, we might be able to go ahead and like lend out an item. So somebody might be paying us like $5 for the day, and so we're earning that as passive income. And again, that creates an opportunity for both players to extract value from the ecosystems, and then also for the game studios to partner with them and say like, okay, well, since we're creating this virtual world for you to exist in, then we'll take a cut as well because we're kind of hosting this world for you. But giving players the opportunity to sort of encourage that behavior and make sure that the velocity increases, like more transaction throughput happens, I think is a very symbiotic relationship. And yeah, so talking about like different properties and items, again, like every item is unique. And like in the analog world, it's pretty common that we talk about any sort of collectibles having a rare history to them. If you go to an auction, you might, or like just if you go on eBay, you might be able to find like some guitar played by a favorite rock star. And that guitar is no different than one that you could buy in the store, but because it was played by that musician on stage, all of a sudden it has like infinitely more valuable. It's like way, way, way more valuable. And people are willing to pay a premium for that. And in that same way, there's a history to any sort of gameplay that's happening. Professionals competing in tournaments might win a match with the sword. They might graduate on from that, and so for them, they're happy to go ahead and like auction that off. Maybe they are able to donate that off to charity, or maybe they retain it all for themselves. But either way, like that item uniqueness does create value, and so that's an interesting property. Some of the most interesting content created in games is user-generated content to begin with. Like the way that players decide to augment their items or even interact with each other creates a whole new level of gameplay. And so, yeah, players should be able to create unique assets based on the things that they generate in their games. So, for example, if you're playing Minecraft, you might build like some building or like city, whatever it might look like. And to be able to like tokenize that as an NFT and then allow players to like come into that space and engage in it is a very unique way to sort of monetize gameplay as well. So for studios, it does bring up an interesting idea that because all assets are minted on the same blockchain, it's a public ledger that anyone can read. So maybe two studios decide to partner together, or maybe one studio launches two games, and there's some sort of interaction between the two games. Maybe an item is minted in one game, and all of a sudden it appears in another game. And so to have that sort of cross-game compatibility is very interesting. We actually have two games set up in the back, and the two games are Plasma Dog and My Memory Bus. And probably in the next week or so, we'll officially announce something along these lines between the two games. Cool. The other thing too is that gameplay won't just be contained to like one single game. Items won't just be transferred. It'll also be behaviors or actions or like tickets that unlock certain maps or who knows what that might look like between games. This might sound like a little far out between like two different games, but if you think about independent titles, which might only develop a game that offers like 4 hours of content, a way to extend that gameplay's lifespan might be to collaborate with some other indie game that comes out, and then it helps relaunch some activity inside of your own game. It also would drive any sort of like marketing attention from a game that already has had users to a new game that's coming out. Additionally, it's interesting to think about like sequels. So the game might move, like if the first game launches and they put out the sequel, there's a whole like history of gameplay in that first game that the player feels like they're completely abandoned in. So to be able to take that first game and sort of like continue the gameplay into the second game expands the whole experience quite a bit. Permanent death is possible. Someone else. Yeah. I mean, so I suppose that's possible. Yeah. But anyway. So something else that again is interesting is like how players will begin to interact with each other. Players will be able to hire each other for specific tasks or gameplay. In this case, maybe a player would want to put out a hit on someone else. So a weaker player might hire a more powerful player to take out one of their enemies. Maybe it is some competitor, like another farmer or something like that. So be able to like negotiate in these smart contracts is very valuable. Co-ownership is also something that's interesting, especially in the concept of like creating guilds and being able to stake any sort of in-game asset on a particular style of gameplay. So if like one player discovers a rare plot of land, lots of rare minerals on it, then they might go to a group of people that they're friendly with and say like, hey, I'll tell you where this is, if we can all engage in some sort of guild or collective ownership, because by myself, I couldn't just defend this plot of land, so it'd be more valuable if we like all come together and then help defend against it. For game developers, there's obviously the topic of like crowdfunding, and sharing items between games is, yeah, I mean, I guess pretty much the same thing as before. But if you go to the next one, the same item or like same token could be cross-referenced in different ways. I gave a presentation like for the opening of CoinFest and talked about games as a relayer model, so that the tokens are separate and that the game itself is an interface that can be totally modular or changed differently. So maybe one version of the game plays like a space adventure, another one might be like a sports game, but like the character and the items, that like economic value, it stays the same in the background, and then the game up front changes in some way, and that can be monetized as well. Companion apps, again, because like everything's open source, you could create like a blockfolio, right, for all of your in-game assets. So growing out that universe is very, very important. Once again, royalties on secondary markets are possible, especially for game creators. Crowdfunding, as I talked about a little bit earlier. So yeah, with crowdfunding, I mean, that's, I suppose, like relatively self-explanatory. Some of the other interesting ideas is like taking more of the real world and injecting it into games. So because like the payment rails are effectively the same as like in the virtual worlds as in the real worlds, those can be getting to interact in very unique ways. Like having sponsorships of any players instead of like in a professional tournament, that being just on the jersey of the player who's like, or the t-shirt of the players who are playing, it can actually be added to the game itself. So that way when it's being streamed out, this is far more visible than the player in the bottom left corner or something like that. So that's interesting. Pawn shops, so being able to actually take the real world value that you have in your games and being able to cash it out in the real world for something. I've got a couple friends. One has an account that is worth something like $5,000 on an open exchange, and maybe like $10,000. But these are like in traditional games that they told the whole account, like they couldn't sell each individual item. But if they could, pawn the items individually or take out some collateralized loan, they could go ahead and put that maybe into like a down payment for a house or something like that. To be able to interact with the real world is also a huge value. Insurance is also something that would be very interesting, like creating new business models where people are saying like there might be a lifespan to a particular item, like after so many hours of gameplay, that item is going to be destroyed, or maybe there's some like probability involved in it. Players could then sell some type of insurance policy to each other, or engage in like all sorts of business that we see in the real world, but start adding that to the blockchain world. And because the game developers don't really need to support this in the game, this could all merge in its own ecosystem separately. Inheritance is also something that is in the real world, but we don't have in the virtual world. So yeah, I mean, if you want to like even share assets with your siblings or your parents or other family members, even friends, you're not able to do that right now, but since you own them, you should be able to do that. And so being able to like create a sort of smart contract, maybe an untimely death or something like that, a will, or even just like being able to like send it over to your friends, like obviously not in the event of a death, would be very beneficial. Data as labor. So there's a lot of real economic value that's created as players are playing games. There's a really good white paper written by a professor out of Indiana University. His name is Robison, and he talks about players for hire. I believe the subtitle is something like labor, or it's like the future of labor and no-skill work. Yeah. But the idea is basically being that as artificial intelligence, automation begin to automate a lot of jobs away, what people are going to have to retreat into or probably find or specialize in is human-based activities, which probably come down to like service-based activities. And he draws a really interesting analogy where he describes like MMOs or any sort of like any multiplayer game where there's a community involved. Like that's really what's driving the value of the game, especially for big spenders. Those games are going to begin trying to incentivize more players to play the game, and they might just end up paying players directly to start playing them. The reason being is it's something like 0.25% of all players are responsible for more than half of all in-game purchases. So and the only reason that like the whales are going into the games in the first place to spend any money is because there's a community. They either want to level up in some way and buy more powerful items because they want to defeat other players, or they're buying vanity items because they want to distinguish themselves from other players. So in any case, there needs to be a community for those big spenders to spend money. So yeah, just by playing a game, you're creating real economic value. So the analogy that he draws in this white paper is like, some games might advertise in the future like, hey, we have real life players, not just like AIs or NPCs. In this game, in much the same way that you see grocery stores talking about like, hey, we have fresh organic produce as opposed to like GMO. So that's like an interesting thought to consider. Virtual jobs also, as mentioned earlier, like are a unique way to monetize gameplay, where players can be hired to carry out specific tasks for other players in the game. Even game developers, before they launch their game, can hire players to go ahead and play test their games and make sure that everything works all right. Again, like pay to play versus pay to play. This is a little bit what I was talking about earlier. We kind of saw in the beginning of gaming a large move, or like it started out very much as like buy to play. It's like you bought a title when you had that disc, then you could play the game as much as you wanted. And then it kind of shifted into a subscription model where you pay to play, then sort of free to play, and that pendulum sort of swinging even further, where there's a good chance that it'll swing towards the get paid to play games. So yeah. So that is sort of the overview of like some of the different economic activities that could occur in games. In any case, like an exchange of some sort or a marketplace where people go to discover where these opportunities are would be necessary. And whether that's installed directly in the game or if that's like some online portal or a variety of different portals like we see now with like different decentralized exchanges, just with like fungible tokens, that infrastructure is very much going to be required. So that's why Hoard is focused on our SDK and our decentralized exchange. So yeah, thank you so much. Go to the next one. You can follow us at Hoard Exchange. I'm at Bob Robison, and the website is hoard.exchange.
Good job. Yeah, if anyone has, I've actually spent the entire talk playing Plasma Dog over there as the Bufficorn, the most manly unicorn there is. So we're going to take a quick little break, and then we're gonna really hope our Enjin coin speaker shows up. He was here earlier. All his swag's here. I've been pilfering it along with others, but we're gonna track him down, and then we'll be back and beat the stream for about 10 to 20 minutes, and we'll see you guys then for our final talk. Thank you so much. Are we ready? All right, everybody, we are back for the final talk of CoinFest Blockchain Gaming Expo. There will be more events tomorrow. Of course, we have our mass blockchain wedding, which I believe this current speaker is also taking part in. It's going to be very special, everybody. I was ordained from an online church just for this. So yeah, next up we got Witek from Enjin Coin. We're going to talk about Enjin Coin and what they're working on, what they're building. Yeah, congrats on the Samsung partnership, bro. All right, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, hey guys. So yeah, my name is Witek. I'm the CTO of Enjin. We've been around for about 10 years now. We are a company that does. When we started, we made a social network website creation platform for gamers. And in the last 2 years, we've been working on blockchain because, we've been working on blockchain because our previous tools allowed for virtual item sales and virtual item distribution for games. And we realized that there was a lot of interesting problems we could solve with blockchain and virtual items. So, ownership of one's digital identity. So, I think this is a very interesting and important thing to focus on in games. I have this little story. So, I used to play MMORPGs. I used to be a real big RPG addict. I had a guild. I played one of these early 3D MMO games, and in that game, I was one of the early players, and I got this really rare item. It was this rare backpack that was actually kind of overpowered, and then I stepped away from the game for a while. I had all my friends and things in this game. I stepped away for a year or two. I came back into the game, and actually the item and my characters were all wiped. Everything I had in that game, all the thousands of hours I spent in that game, they were all wiped out, and that was pretty devastating to me because the game developer decided to clear out all the old accounts to clear their database. And you know, when a gamer puts all this time and energy into a game, they invest their mind, time, they have their own virtual identity in these games. And then, you know, when all these items are centralized in a game, and some game company can just decide to take it away, or their servers get hacked, or their servers can go down, that really disconnects people. People can start becoming jaded when their items get removed, because you want to feel like you own these items. When you're playing a game, you battle the epic dragon, you know, you pick up that awesome sword, you worked for that, you played with your friends, you spent time in that game. But it really is, in all games today, it's really just an item on a database somewhere on the game developer's server. So what we're doing at Enjin, what we're doing at Enjin is we are building a blockchain platform this thing ran out of batteries.
Oh, which one do you want?
Oh, okay. Maybe you can do the slides. So yeah, we're building a blockchain platform for item tokenization. What you do is you basically create tokens using our 1155 standard, and these can represent game items in the game. So on the blockchain, it's a token ID, such as like the spell book, this 0x01 and a bunch of hexadecimal numbers after that. But then when the game recognizes that item, then it'll show the spellbook graphics or 3D model. Okay, so so each token has a history of its own. This is a cool feature in blockchain items because you can start creating history of items. You can say that items have been owned by a user, and then as they've been transferred to another user, that history gets appended to the item, and now games can start using that metadata in their gameplay. So, like this, the player could have killed the evil dragon, looted the sapphire mace, and done all these things in the game. And this is their identity that starts being built up on the blockchain. Each item has this history built up into it. You can append metadata to the items, like leveling them up and doing things like that. And the player's account itself has a history. So with Enjin Coin platform, we designed it in a way that each game item has a reserve value. You infuse, as a game developer, you infuse the items with Enjin Coin tokens, and then the player that owns this item can now melt it at any time in the future. Even if the game is long gone, it's no longer existing, they can melt the item and then receive the Enjin Coin back into their game account. So the benefits to players are anyone who owns a game asset can transfer the item into another account. They can melt the item to extract its reserve value. They can use the item in other supported games. And now this is a cool one because we're building the first gaming multiverse. So since these items are fully accessible publicly to any game that uses them, to any game that is interested, any game can actually see the player's account and say, okay, I'm going to show this item in your inventory as well. So we have over 30 games now working with our platform, and many of them are sharing items. I think it's almost up to 30 now that are sharing different items together. We actually created some multiverse items. We made like a sword, a shield, a bunch of generic kind of items, and then these games integrate them, and now they show up in different ways in the game. So if it's a If it's a 2D game, so depending on the game, if it's a 2D game, it might show up as a pixelated hammer on the right here. If it's a 3D game, it might show up with their own graphics, but it's all referring to that same license that the player has. So we're building a blockchain game toolkit. The first piece of that is the Enjin platform. Maybe I should just stand by the laptop. Okay, so this is a collection of tools. So it starts with blockchain SDKs. We have 2 SDKs that are basically out right now. The Unity SDK, it's been out for the last month or so. And the Godot SDK is coming out just shortly now. These let you integrate these game items into your games. And with the Unity SDK, we actually made a visual editor that people can use. They can game developers can open up this visual interface, and they can start minting and creating these items, defining them right in this visual interface. You can be just a game designer without any coding experience and start creating these items. And obviously, you can go into the C# code as well and have all the control you need over transferring, creating, melting, all the stuff you want to do with these virtual items. We also have a C# SDK, just a generic one that's launching very soon, and the Java SDK that's launching very soon as well. Okay, so we built a platform API. So when you want to interact with these different items, there's a lot of things that has to happen. So we have a whole bunch of tools like the mobile wallet and the smart contracts and all these different pieces together. So we built an API that someone can just call with GraphQL. GraphQL is a really powerful language. It's been built by Facebook, and you can use a sort of SQL-style query to retrieve any kind of data in any kind of aggregated format. So with this powerful API, you can actually say, transfer these items to these players, create a trade just by writing this little SQL query. And it has integrations with about a couple dozen languages. So whatever language your game is programmed in, you can just install the integration into that language as well, and just use it directly. Yeah, these are some of the language that it supports. Okay, so here's a trusted cloud. It's a website where when someone joins a game, they basically link their wallet, their mobile wallet, to the game, and they're trusting that game to send notifications to the wallet. So if you're going to trade your set of armor with a player and you want to receive some gold back, this trusted cloud will send a notification to the wallets of the 2 players. The wallets will ask the player, do you want to do this transaction? The player just hits one button and then it goes through. So it makes it really easy. And there's a wallet daemon as well for game developers who just need to process thousands of transactions on the back end. They can run this on a server and process all their transactions. We're also working on Efinity due out this summer. This is a secondary scaling solution. So we are building a side chain, and we are eventually going to be also baking in state channels to that. So this will actually handle. Our initial benchmarks were 200 transactions per second, but now we're aiming for possibly 1,000 transactions per second on V1. So yeah, this slide has 200 transactions per second. Ethereum is 15 to 45 transactions per second right now. But we realized that with these games processing so many transactions, we needed to build the system. We also have an Enjin wallet. It's the most powerful mobile wallet and most secure, in my opinion. We coded the whole thing from the ground up for. Sorry. Okay, so we made this wallet. Initially, we needed a wallet for game items to appear for all these transactions and interactions to happen easily for people playing these games. But then we decided we'll just also make the best Ethereum wallet and Bitcoin wallet and Litecoin wallet as well. So it supports these things. It also supports all your ERC 1155 true collectibles. So as soon as you receive the item in a game, it'll show up. You'll receive a push notification on your wallet. You'll receive any notifications of, if the game wants you to trade, if it wants you to do anything with those items. If you want to use the magic potion, you have to accept that you want to drink it and destroy the token, for example. We also have the Enjin X Explorer we built. This is just a good way to show all your Pokedex of items on the blockchain. We are going to show all ERC 1155, all ERC 721, and all ERC 20 tokens, which are the major token standards on Ethereum. And you can here see that it's all categorized by games. You can go into each game and see, what items there are, how many Enjin coins are reserved in these items. You can see all the, the armory of what's available in the game. And eventually, we want to show really cool, detailed stats about the items, like how popular they are, and which items are being traded the most. All the sorts of detailed activity you can get from that rich blockchain data. And already you can see things like the info of the item, how many holders there are, hodlers there are, and all that. And finally, we have Enjin Beam. This was a cool experiment we did, and it turned out to be really popular. We've had 50,000 beam scans done already on the system. This is a way for, just by scanning a QR code, you can receive an asset onto your phone. You don't have to have any previous Ethereum. You can just install a brand new wallet, scan the QR, and you're sent the item. And we're finding this is a really powerful tool for promoting your content. So if you have a smartphone, you can take a picture of this QR code, or if you have the Enjin wallet installed, if you scan this using the scan QR function, this will actually send you one of our multiverse items. So this is a really cool way for a game, for example, a game developer creates a new game. They have a whole bunch of items they want to promote. They show this to a Twitch streamer, or put it up on YouTube, or put it up on any area they want, and they can get thousands of people receiving collectibles for their game, even if the game's not out yet. And now they'll really want to play that game and see what's happening, right? You can start integrating this with all sorts of interesting ways. If a large game has trailers or promos on TV, they can show this QR code and get distribution to hundreds of thousands of people using this simple method. So it was a really simple thing to build, and it turned out to be extremely popular. There's all sorts of treasure hunters looking for these Enjin QR codes now. Okay, so skipped over it. Okay, so we have the ERC 1155 multi-token standard. I'm the first author of this standard, and we brought in a bunch of other people to work on it with us. We decided that we needed to create a new token standard for Ethereum. When we started this project, there was ERC 20 tokens, and these are just one type of stackable item. You're familiar with these with all the ERC 20 tokens out there on CoinMarketCap, for example. They have a symbol, they have some decimal places, and you have one big stack of them, and you can trade, 100 copies of these. These are fungible items. Then ERC 721 is a non-fungible item. So these tokens, every single token is a unique item. So for example, CryptoKitties, every single CryptoKitty is a unique serial number on the blockchain, and each one can have its own metadata, its own parameters. The problem with ERC 20 and ERC 721 is when you're creating a video game, there could be thousands or hundreds of thousands of different items available. And the game developer firstly needs to make these items cheaply and efficiently. And then they need to have all sorts of different kinds of parameters. They need to be fungible, or they might need to be non-fungible items, or you might be able to devise some semi-fungible scheme where you can start out with a normal sword and then turn it into a signed or enchanted sword that becomes non-fungible. The cool thing about ERC 1155 is we've been working on this standard for about it's probably more than 6 months now, and it allows you to deploy one big smart contract that has a whole set of rules that defines the universe that your items live in. So if you're creating a game that needs to use ERC 1155, that wants their items to behave a certain way, for example, when they're minted, they're not tradable for X number of blocks, and then they become tradable. Or if you're a supply chain company and you want to create items that behave in certain rule sets, you can create these all under one contract. You can mint infinite copies in that contract. It costs orders of magnitude less than deploying new contracts for every token on the other token standards. And another cool thing you can do with ERC 1155 is multi-transfers, batch operations on tokens. So we've calculated you can do something like 200 transfers, 200 different token IDs in one batch transaction. And as you add more tokens to that number, the base gas costs start going down. And you can do atomic trades as well. So you can trade 3 tokens for 3 completely other tokens in one transaction. That happens atomically. You don't have to rely on trusting anyone. So here's a few games that are using our platform. We have over 30 now, and we see about 2 or 3 a week now appearing. Just people that are building games that are starting to download some early adopters using the technology. So Age of Rust, this is like a Myst in space using blockchain for puzzles. So they have all sorts of cool puzzles. The graphics look cool. It's science fiction. I can go to the next slide. It's kind of post-apocalyptic. You have some Blade Runner themes going on here. I mean, this looks pretty cool.
He used to be, and he had to use your token swap mechanism.
Yes. Yeah. So I think he was not building on Enjin earlier, and he actually switched over to our platform.
He wasn't doing well for him, or he was having liquidity issues. I had his tokens, and I had to go on the counterparty decks.
Yeah. He was. This guy. So yeah, he used Rust bits. Yeah, his tokens were called Rust bits, and it was just not powerful enough on the other platform. So. He switched over to our platform now. He can just focus on his game. He can do all the same stuff that he was trying to do before and much more. He's been very creative in doing things like using cooldowns for a number of blocks that must pass to use an item. You might have to have certain items to open certain things in the game. He's using all sorts of cool blockchain mechanisms to make his puzzles work, which is pretty fun. And then we have games like Bitcoin Hodler, which is, Flappy Bird on the blockchain, but then what's really cool about it is tokens appear in the game. And based on the current price of the token on the market, these tokens that you pick up can hurt you or give you FUD or Moon at the top. And if you go all the way into FUD, then the game ends, right? So it's a really cool way of using blockchain. And some of these characters, this guy right here is Mike. It's one of our multiverse characters we created, and this works across a whole bunch of games. So if you have this character Mike, you can go into this game, you can fly around with him, he has special powers, and you can go into another game and he's a giant golem, for example. And this is another screenshot of this game, one of the levels.
How many games is Mike in so far?
I think Mike is in something like 6 or 7 games.
Nice.
Yeah. But altogether we have something like 30 using multiverse items. Very sorry about the control issues here.
Give me a hand signal.
Yeah, next.
Forward, back.
Okay, next. Yeah, so they're using tokenized characters, items, and spacecraft, in-game item crafting, upgrades, and blockchain rewards, and they're also using the token prices in their game. Okay, so this is a game called Alterverse. This guy has a really ambitious project. He's building 17 different universes you can explore. and he's integrating multiverse items and using blockchain across all these different worlds. Forward. Okay, so blockchain-based items. He has trading. You can actually tokenize land, characters, assets. One really interesting thing is you can tokenize servers, so the ability to have a server in the game. If you have that token, you can run that server and generate revenue in the game. And then, he's using multiverse, as I said. This is Cats and Mechs. Kyle from Cats and Mechs, he's crazy. He is building an AI storyteller who is basically looking at your blockchain history and modifying the gameplay based on what kind of history you have on the blockchain with your account. So, there. So bounties. You can place bounties on tougher players to weigh down their defenses and get a piece of the loot pool. You can tech mining, you can have all sorts of stuff. I don't know. I actually don't even know what he's doing there. But the deep learning thing is really cool, since there's all that deep history of all the different games you've played, all the things that happened with your multiverse items. He's actually working with a real piece of AI to make the gameplay happen. All right, and this is 9 Lives Arena. One cool thing about the blockchain is you can have permadeath, and it's a really high stakes thing. So if you have 9 lives and you lose those 9 lives, then you have to go purchase another 9 lives and make a brand new character, and your previous character turns into a statue on the blockchain. So this game looks really amazing. I mean, a lot of these games, these are mainstream games. This is what we're targeting, because we want to take this from the angle of actual fun games and put blockchain in them, give them assets, and let people own things in those games, so they're a really fun experience, and they're focused on the game first. So in this game, you have tokenized items, weapons, armor. You can get blueprints for weapons that are tokens. And you have these things called oogies that use these blueprints offline. You can control these little trolls that walk around the game, collect resources for you, and then build your weapons and armor out of those blueprints. You have belts lost on permadeath, and they're using the assets really in all these ways. And I had a video here, but it looks like it can't be loaded because of the internet. But there's a lot of games now that are just integrating blockchain using our SDK. They can do this in a number of hours. We saw a game integrate crafting, enchanting, picking up items, the wallet, all this stuff within 2 or 3 days just by installing our Unity SDK, which is really incredible. Like, I'm amazed that they're integrating these things so fast. So yeah, thank you for listening. I'm really sorry about the technical problems here. It happens. But if you have any questions, you can ask them to me now or later after the presentation.
I find the server thing interesting, where you say you tokenize the servers. That's cool to me because in a previous talk, I was noting when we were some people doing online MMOs trying to shard it, or like one person has to control some of the centralized aspects. Like, if we tokenize the server, we could entrust it to a person. I mean, it would have to be economically a closed loop, and he would have to profit from it for him to want to tokenize it.
And another cool thing you can do with tokenizing a server is you can have a guild run a server and have ownership of that token by multiple people, and then they can all benefit from the profits.
Or if you could do that, a lot of people when they try to distribute an ecosystem, they realize full decentralization, or it's like full blockchain decentralization gets too hard, and they try to do a distributed node concept. Like, if you distributed the servers through tokenization of them, it might be interesting. Like, maybe your server is down. Like, in more traditional World of Warcraft, that was my added addiction back in the day. My server just went down. I can't play. But there could be redundancy if it was tokenized, or they would compete to be the one I'm using.
Exactly, and then also the hosting doesn't have to be, doesn't have to be centralized to that source. It can be run on multiple different clouds, and the token defines who's running that server. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Oh, he has a question? Yeah.
Are there only retailers?
There are a lot of proposals. There are EIP proposals on the Ethereum GitHub. I think those are the three that have gained the most attention, the most recognition. I've got a lot of work put into them, a lot of iterations, a lot of comments, like hundreds of comments. There are people trying to do similar things, but we tried to, with ERC 1155, there was like maybe 5 different people around the same time trying to do the same thing. But we've been working on this for a while, and we've really tried to strip down any. Okay, I'll talk about what kind of comments came into the discussion. I mean, a lot of people were saying stuff like, you need to make this similar to ERC20 because that's what people are used to, right? And we really tried to fight against that. We don't need to have a symbol for tokens, for example. We don't need to have certain legacy, like non-safe transfer functions, things like that. We really want to make the perfect future-proof standard, strip out as much fluff as possible, but keep all the power possible. So now people can build their own extensions and build on top of the standard. But yeah, I think those 3 are the main ones.
Yeah, obviously, apart from user adoption, what's the thing that you're most excited for that Enjin is about to kind of embark on?
Well, so yeah, I mean, other than the games coming on board, I mean, I've actually seen a lot of enterprises. We're talking with a lot of enterprises. We've spun up a whole enterprise division in our company. People outside of gaming are actually wanting to use this for so many different things, or to gamify their non-gaming products. And that really has a huge potential, so we'll be seeing some of that later this year. I'm also really excited about bringing this out, bringing this to a large scale using scaling. We run up against the Ethereum block speed limits and the transaction limits, and as these games start coming out, we really have to get the second layer scaling out. There's a bunch of solutions out there. People are working on all sorts of stuff. I know Hoard was working on, they have Plasma Dog and all that stuff, and there's Radomski Network. There's all sorts of people building their own solutions. Ours is going to be focused towards this kind of rich assets on the blockchain, rich gaming assets, and supporting smart contracts and those kind of things to the thousands of transactions per second. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you. All right, everybody who's made it this far, which is a lot of you. Thank you so much for attending CoinFest Blockchain Gaming Expo. That was our last talk for the day. So I'm just going to say a few closing words, and then we can all have a little bit of time to hang out before we clear. And make sure you pick up your swag. So, of course, we got to thank all our sponsors. We got Enjin Coin, of course, GeoCoin, CoinDroids, Hoard Exchange, and Einstein Exchange, BitNational right over there, Symmetria, TapCoin from earlier, really cool project. Did I miss any?
Did you say Einstein?
Yeah.
I think you got it. Symmetria?
You got it there? Yeah. I'm getting better at this. By the end of the day, I usually don't skip any of it. For anyone earlier, yeah. So I just want to give a few words about CoinFest, just so you know how this kind of started. It was my friend right there, Andrew Wagner, maybe 6 years ago, was just wanted to do a free convention that was open for other people to host their own versions of. And he's just, the only rule is it's got to be done in a place that accepts Bitcoin, or in some way accepts Bitcoin. So it was a way to push merchant adoption. So he'd go around and say, hey, I'll bring people to your place for CoinFest, but you got to accept my down payment in Bitcoin. And they're like, what's that? So starting from that, 6 years ago, every year, the first week of April, we try to get together and do a bunch of events. People come in from out of town, just happen to be here, and they decide maybe they're just going to host their own event for that week. As long as it's free to attend and fits with the CoinFest ethos, that's okay. Probably the two of the more amazing things about it is it's become a real big thing in a few places in Africa. So in Botswana and Bahrain, and
Bahrain's not in Africa.
Bahrain's not in Africa. Botswana.
Nigeria.
And Nigeria.
Botswana.
Yeah, that's the first one. So yeah, so three, and Ghana. So that's 4 places in Africa. It turns out even though it was created here, the Manchester version, apparently those guys go hard on CoinFest. So it's actually like the #1 CoinFest now for population and and there's soccer hooligans over there. They know who they are. Yeah. So that just shows that if you want to build something and you just start it and do it and take the action, it can really grow into something that's beyond you. If something happened to Andrew right now, and I think this is something that he talks about, if something happened to him, you wouldn't hurt CoinFest. CoinFest would keep going with or without him, even though he created it. And it's really in the spirit of Bitcoin and blockchain, how you create something that doesn't even need you or any single person to function. And he pulled that off. And 6 years later, it's pretty amazing to be part of this every year I can, and watch it grow over time. Vancouver is very lucky to have this, man. So my closing speech turned into a thank you, Andrew. So let's give a round of applause for Andrew, please. Longest clap of the day. Just for you, my friend. So since it is only the 6th and CoinFest is the first week of April, that leaves the 7th, which will be very special. We are having possibly the first mass blockchain wedding. At least 3 people will be getting married on the blockchain. 3 couples, yeah, 3 people. Just so the math wouldn't work out. Yeah, well, it is the blockchain, so we can have a 3 of 3 multi-sig. I don't know. Let's not go there today. Yeah, we're going to be having 3 couples. That's going to be at Francesco's. At Francesco's, it's right off the water. It's a beautiful, beautiful venue. It's going to be from 1 to 4. I don't know what our live stream situation looks like. Are we doing it?
Sturkey doesn't show up. We'll do it from our YouTube channel.
Yeah, so Sturkey's not there, who wasn't here today, although Ubik had that representation. Geocoin? Sturkey didn't make it today, but hopefully he'll be there tomorrow to stream the wedding. If not, look for it online. Follow the CoinFest Twitter and stuff, and I'm sure you'll find a link. It's going to be really fun. We're going to finish off after with a short-range DVP, so if you're not familiar with the decentralized dance party, and you've never experienced one, it's a really positive, fun, and happy environment that just gets created in the middle of wherever it happens. And it's a really positive and fun thing. It's going to be a little bit of a daytime version, so there might be some kiddos running around, so party responsibly. Yeah, here it comes. Oh, I missed the camera. I got a lot of Bitcoin balloons. These make it to every CoinFest, just so you know, and we always have leftovers.
On his own product.
Yeah, somebody got these made and just they FOMO'd. They ended up with too many. Now they're holding bags, literally, of these balloons. And because of that, for the last 3 or 4 years, they were talking 2013 bull run FOMO. It was like that Bitcoin. These balloons are going to be hot. This is what I do to put my money in. And so here we are, 2019, it was 2014, I think, so 2019, we still have Bitcoin balloons, and they still make a great appearance every CoinFest. We filled rooms with these things. Yeah.
And will again.
And will again. So I really hope everyone had a great time today, and thank you so much to our sponsors, thank you so much to our attendees, our exhibitors, especially our attendees, that's you guys. Yeah. And we will see you all tomorrow at the blockchain wedding, I hope. Yeah. It shall be a it's going to go grand and glorious, but I messed that up. It'll be a grand glorious affair. All right, thank you everybody. And see you guys.